My goodness, are you in for a treat with today's episode? I talked with Mae Yoshikawa, who is a mother, a writer, a blogger, a yoga instructor, a yogi specifically. And she is just such a beautiful soul, and you'll get the capture the essence of who she is so quickly. We talked for over an hour and 20 minutes in this episode here, and we totally could have gone on. And we are going to have a part 2 because there's so much more to expand upon. We go into how she's gone through trials and tribulations and very traumatic events throughout her early years that got her to where she is right now. And not only has she expanded upon that, but she has really been able to go out and deliver the message with other people of what they can do when they go inward and they connect in with their heart to understanding who they are, be okay with the quietness, and to really find that safe place, what it means to be in a safe space and a safe place, not just physically, but within your mind, within your body, and to fully embody that. And she goes through and she describes in beautiful detail how she experienced that with the differences in her pregnancies, from her first pregnancy to her second pregnancy, and how that really evolved. And you could just feel the essence of who she is and how she embodied that in just describing it throughout her pregnancy. So even though when you hear this episode, you're going to hear a lot about that, talking about as a mom and her laboring, but this applies to life. So I'm so excited for you to dive in so you can capture these tools, these nuggets, these gems on what you can do to apply find the safety and the security within your mind, within your heart, and to come into heart-brain coherence for you to be able to just live peacefully and a life full of vigor, and also just absolute satisfaction and joy and inner knowing and confidence of who you are, regardless of outside judgments, cultural subjections, and anything else that might be limiting you to becoming the expansive person that you really are. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Igniting Consciousness podcast, where we talk all things in relation to expanding your mind, your awareness, and your consciousness of who you are is here in life, how to bring it forward, wake up other people, and how to live your best self. I'm joined today with a beautiful human being, a beautiful woman that is across the world in Japan right now as we're recording on completely different times. But the beauty of the online world serves and provides for us, Mae Yoshikawa. And she is a mother, a writer, a yoga, I should say, like a yogi. You probably could label yourself as a yogi, right? And massive amount of information that she could be sharing with us today in relation to how she's found herself into her work, what she's doing today, how she started expanding her mind and unraveling and getting into this world of expanding consciousness and what that means to her and how it can relate to you, and share messages probably with other women, but other people in general, how they can start to elevate themselves and become better versions of themselves and enjoy heaven here on earth. Mae, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so delighted to connect with you.
Me too. And I just love how you reached out and actually Instagram, and it's just perfect timing for me, because I'm like anybody who knows I do human design readings like on the side as well, and being a manifester, I'm just so interested in going out, initiating and making things happen. And on this end, you actually initiated and came out to me, and it must have been responding to me putting out in the vortex, out in the field, that I was ready to talk to some other women and other like-minded women in the world around yoga, actually.
Wow.
Like physical practices and very healthfully minded people. So just beautiful how it worked out. Perfect timing. And then now we're connecting. And so, Mae, I just want you to share, and you've mentioned that you wanted to share topic with people that you think are really crucial for people to know about. So let's get into that. And what is it that you want people to know about?
Oh, goodness. I mean, you've been on this road studying, learning, and living a greater awareness, a greater consciousness. It's like we can dive into this from so many different angles. I guess I'll begin by telling you a little bit about myself. I like to say that I look Japanese. I speak American English, but I found my heart in South India because my mom is half American and half Japanese. My mom was, I should say. And I grew up here in Tokyo, Japan. going to international schools. So I'm very fluent in English, but culturally, I'm still somewhat Japanese and kind of a blend. I've actually never lived outside of Japan for very long. And growing up here, there is this imbalance of being a mixed breed in one of the most homogenous cultures of our time. And the sense of searching for myself, a sense of belonging and who I am. And I think I had that in my heart as a deep longing, even since I was a child. I started yoga when I was 21, and that came from a dark tunnel because my mom developed a very rare neurological disease. The symptoms started when I was 17, and she was only 47. It was so rare that it took 2 full years and 9 different university hospitals to diagnose. And when they finally did, they said, this is an atypical Alzheimer type dementia that was eating up at her brain. And from that point, through the initial 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and onwards, her condition would deteriorate in a way where she would lose memory, long-term memory, short-term memory, three-dimensional recognition. She might not be able to look me in the eyes when she talks to me, or she might mistake me for my sister. So I developed these huge questions about what is human consciousness? Who is my mom if she can't see me or remember my name? Does she recognize my being? I had such an ache with these big questions in my mind, but I was also so young, right? That it made me sick. It made me depressed. I was an insomniac, and it was just eating up at my own health in a terrible way. Until finally I was like, okay, I need to start taking care of my own health, or it's not just going to be my mom who's very sick. And I went to doctors that they would typically prescribe me antidepressants and sleeping pills, which can definitely be an option for some. But for me, I felt like it really wasn't getting at the root cause, So I kept searching. I tried acupuncture, chiropractors, and eventually I found yoga and the simplicity of uniting the movement of my breath with the movement of my body and the use of focused conscious awareness to do that changed my life. It helped me to sleep. It helped me to slowly begin to take the reins of the thoughts in my mind that were scattered, hurt, and just shouting, why, God, why, God, why, God? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to us? And as you can imagine, these aren't empowering thoughts, right? These are the very thoughts that were making me more sick. So it took me years, but gradually, through yoga and through meditation, I learned to slowly and gently shift the narrative of my mind, shift the thought so that it could begin to work for me and not against me. So that's kind of the gist of it. But I used these applications of conscious awareness in having a beautiful home birth. And also later on in my life, I touch upon this in my book, but my husband, I lost him to a sudden traffic accident about 5 years ago. So I went through a very tremendous experience of grief in my 30s. And I just don't think I would have survived these experiences of my life had I not developed the awareness to say, that's just a thought. That's just a thought. That's just a thought. Like when something really negative eats up at you. So there's so much I want to share with you and with your audience. But I guess my message is really about taking hold of your conscious awareness, of the mental narrative and your mindset, and that you ultimately have the power to do that, that it's in your hands.
Mm. And that, I mean, that right there, this is where we'll start. That the the tragedy that can happen in life with loved ones. I mean, from your mom to a loss of a husband, of a partner that you have 2 boys, 3 boys,
2 boys.
2 boys with. And how old are your kids now?
They are 14 and 6.
14 and 6. Wow. I mean, so much life. I mean, we know 14 years, along the years prior to with your husband, and being able to come over on the other side, not just for you, but for your children at the same time. And
Right.
to be that beacon of light of, okay, I'm going to, a lot of times we will stand up, we're like, what will we do for our kids? Even if it's not for us a lot of times. Right. So I want to rewind this a bit for you to start to unravel the whole conversation around consciousness is so expansive, and the whole conversation around meditation is so expansive because there's so many different types of meditation. And so many people that are listening in are like, well, I don't know how to meditate. I don't know how to do it the right way. So let's just start with that, with these awarenesses that you had after these tragic situations and that you've had in your life. There's been a lot of work to lead up to you being able to not just handle it, but to be able to process it and to be able to continue on and enjoy life, continuing on, enjoy it. So how did you find your way into meditation? I know earlier in the episode, you talked about you've been in Japan majority of your life, but yet you also made it to India at some point in time, which definitely shows up in your profile because, of course, I pulled your human design, and you have a 1-3 in your profile in human design, and that 3 is definitely what allowed you to be able to want to get out. You want to experience other culture, for the purpose of yoga. What we've realized. So let's talk about that. Of how did you find yourself? And when did you find yourself in India? And then how did you get into meditation and then into yoga? What did that look like?
Yeah, that's just the beauty of it, right? Because who would have ever thought that through the agony of the slow loss of the mother that I knew and the life that I knew, that from that dark place, I would reach for something, like anything that could really save me. And at the time, I was referring to health. And at the time, health meant to me health of the body. But the moment I got on the yoga mat, and since the first day my teacher said, move your body in this way synchronously with your breath, which made me aware of just how out of touch I was with every inhale and every exhale. And it's my own breath, right? Nobody else could do it for me. And yet I was so out of touch with it. I knew since day one that I had a long way to go. But the simplicity of that not only brought me back to my body, but it also taught me experientially that health is not only of the body. You don't have health of the body unless you're a whole person. That's body and mind and soul. And the mind part comes with a lot of thinking, thoughts, and emotions. And the way that I feel it in my experience, it's kind of like paving the way to your soul almost, because your soul's always there. It's always present with you. You're just not, sometimes you don't feel it so close to you because your mind is so noisy. Your emotions are so scattered. So hence, meditation helps you to calm the waters of your mind, to have a sense of this grounded oneness with yourself. Now, I definitely was a person who wasn't going to walk into a meditation class. I think I was in my 3rd year of university. My school friends are just partying and, going out to clubs and drinking their beer, whatever. And in the meantime, There was a little bit of that for me too, but I was also, I always had my mom on my mind. So it was kind of torturous, this dichotomy. And I still wasn't in a place where I was going to walk into a meditation class though, but I would walk into a yoga class for fitness of my body. And that's what I did. But I learned quickly that yoga is almost like meditation and movement because it requires your conscious awareness with your body movement. Yeah. So and then I guess after the yoga class, my teacher would nudge us to just sit for 5 minutes, and then sometimes for 10 minutes, and then sometimes for 20 minutes.
Do they call it shavasana? Like, was that the language that was used? And like typical yoga classes, it's like, all right, shavasana at the end. And I might be saying it wrong, so excuse me, all the yogis in the world there. But like when you literally are like, okay, now I'm not moving my body. I am laying down and I'm surrendering and I'm just allowing myself to process and be at peace and in the nothingness.
Yes. Yes. So in the tradition of yoga that I'm trained in, which is Ashtanga yoga, which is actually very rigorous and athletic as far as the different styles of yoga goes, they don't typically call it shavasana, but it's the same thing. It's just lying down and taking rest and allowing your body to absorb all of the energy that you've just mobilized throughout your system. Yeah. And but my teacher also had this pranayama hour, like 3 times a week after the morning yoga classes. And pranayama is a breathing class. But usually with these breathing classes, you don't just do the breathing exercises. You do the breathing exercises and then you sit a little. Again, to gain awareness around and absorb the energy that you're moving in your body, in your system.
Wow. I have to interject on this because 2 things. Well, one thing, like you just said it earlier, like you were using yoga for the physical of it. But what you're getting to is that yoga is so much more than just the exercise. The yoga actually was founded on the space of what it's doing for your mind and the calming of the mind and syncing up and like lowering the sympathetic and increasing the parasympathetic to get more in that rest, healing, and recovery, to shut down the chattering mind that's oh so loud all the time. And how what you're just getting to right there with that breath, what your teacher clearly was doing, because I've been like studying this, like nostril breathing, versus the typical breathing, which gets you in the sympathetic state. And yes, you can get an altered consciousness and people can literally almost feel like they're doing like plant medicine through the breathing, right? But it's actually putting you in like a near-death experience whenever you do that rapid type of breathing, because like your body feels like it's dying. But the breath that you're describing is that, okay, we're coming back to like slow down the pace, and we're like getting that parasympathetic activation happening in the body, because majority of human beings are always in sympathetic dominance all the time, which is what creates chaos and dis-eases, right? And symptoms and chaos, like expand on that, right? So I just wanted to like interject talking about that. That is clearly very healing type of breath and connectedness to bring your mind, like get out of your head and into your heart.
Yes.
Into your body, right?
Yes. And so the super simplified takeaway for your listeners is that equanimity of mind follows equanimity of breath. So anytime during your day when you notice that you're panting because you're hurried, or maybe you're sighing because you're sad, but you're not inhaling, or like, maybe you're inhaling a lot and then you're exhaling, it's super short. Whatever it is, if you just take a moment to pause and notice and inhale and exhale in an equalized manner. So let the inhalation be as long, strong, and steady as your exhalation, and immediately you'll begin to calm down your mind.
That's getting that parasympathetic activation. I always tell people, like, our bodies are so hardwired to be like, oh, it's stress o'clock somewhere right now. So your body's just going to like find a reason to get stressed out and like worried or like, oh, rushed, or I have to do this, or have like find like something to worry about. And I'm putting air quotes around that. And exactly what you're saying about doing that type of breathing, what is there a name for that type of breathing, what you're describing, where you're equalizing the amount, that the number and the amount of the inhale is the same on the exhale, so you can make sure that you can lower that frantic state, lower that anxiety, and bring up more of the like calm, cool, collected, focused, and actually stop that anxious mind, that type of breathing you're describing?
I don't know that there is, but as far as I know, my teacher would just call it even breathing. But as we practice it, but as we practice it though, in the context of yoga, it got more and more intense. For example, initially we would practice 4 counts in and 4 counts out. And then we would practice 8 counts in and then 8 counts out. And then eventually you can extend that to 16 and 16. And then if you get really practiced at, and then if you really practice calming your mind down, it's almost like you're a deep sea diver, right? You need to really shut down your mind so that your body and mind don't require oxygen because you're really slowing down the breath. You can work it to 32 and then even eventually to 64. Yeah, which is like, I'm talking about extreme practices of yoga now. And this is after like, at least after 10, 12 years of practice. But I'm saying it's possible to guide your body and your nervous system to that kind of calmness again. Yeah.
Have you, whenever you get in those extended, and this is like my curiosity, and I know my other people that are like deep in, the nervous system world, because I have a lot of other chiropractors that listen to this as well. Whenever you're doing the extensive breaths, like when you're saying going like 16 plus and definitely getting into the 64 range, do you feel out of your body? Or do you feel like, what would you say? Like, do you feel kind of like you're in an altered state?
That's really interesting. You question that. That's really interesting because personally, like in terms of my personal experience, I would say that I lose a sense of my body. So I wouldn't even say that I'm out of my body because I'm not even feeling my body as something to be out of. I'm only feeling the pure consciousness. I'm in the pure consciousness. I am the pure consciousness. So it's not that the body is in or out, that I'm in or out of the body, or that the body exists or doesn't exist. It's just that it doesn't matter because you're just in a pure consciousness state. That's how I sense it.
Yeah, no, I'm just intrigued because I'm just literally visualizing, because there's so many different practices of where, Joe Dispenza's work, and also with like Greg Braden and Bruce Lipton, and all these different ways of being able to manifest. Like that's like the mental states whenever you get the heck out of this primitive brain that's always in survival mode. What do I have to do to survive? And then you can, there's different practices where you can, when you get out of your head into your heart, is like a big thing we always talk about, getting into heart brain.
Yeah.
Your breath, I mean, I've also heard is obviously breath is life, like, right? And so use your breath to get in those altered states as well, to also train your, not have to be so logical and so on, rather than allowing more of the back to like retraining and reprogramming your subconscious, really. So I'm like getting into like nerdy neurological stuff, but you can do that all with the breath. And when you're describing this, it's just getting me all like excited.
Yes. Yeah. I want to touch upon something though, because I'm all into this kind of nerdy stuff too. But when you say though, and I know that I've been there, and I would imagine that maybe some of your listeners are there too, is that when you go after it, the state, like when you go after the altered state, or even like the heart-brain coherence or living from your heart, when you go after it and you're being a go-getter about it, okay, when you approach the whole topic and the whole practice with the mindset of it's another thing I want to tick on my to-do list, you haven't left the conditioned state of mind that is actually very mental still, right? You haven't let go of the mind because you're still using the mind to want to get out of it, which is actually quite a paradox. And you keep presenting yourself with a lot of resistance. You'll never quite get there. You'll always find yourself trying. It took me freaking years to realize this, Dr. Natalie, but I'm trying to kind of condense it for your listeners here. Is there will come a point, okay, so I don't know, for me, for the first 10 years at least, maybe 12 years, I used my mind wanting to get better, my mind wanting to be more calm, my mind wanting to be more peaceful, wanting to detox, wanting to clear out all this gunk out of my nervous system from conditioned past. I used that will to freaking get up in the morning, every morning, whatever, 3:30, practice for 2 hours, breathe for an hour, chant for an hour, meditate for an hour, whatever, and then eat a certain way, go to South India, do these things. I have been highly, highly disciplined in my life, especially for the first 12, 15 years of my life, and then with a couple of pregnancies and kitty stuff in between, right? But I've been super disciplined.
Oh, just no big deal. Just a couple of pregnancies, which is like a rite of passage for a woman, and she goes through the stock portal, no big deal. No, amazing. Monthly through over here.
And then there will come a point, if as you're practicing, as you're proceeding on your path, there will come a point where you realize that your own mindset of wanting to get there is setting up your own barrier. And so in the ancient yogic texts, right, I think it's the Upanishads or something, there's this verse that I just have always been so fascinated with about the metaphor they use is of a funeral pyre, and there's a fire there, and you take a piece of wood, like a wooden stick, right? And you use it to poke the fire and to poke the fire and to poke the fire, to work the thing and to work the thing and to work the thing, to keep the fire going, to get there. But finally, when the fire is warm enough and when done all it is that you need to do, finally your last, I'll put that in air quotes, is to take the stick you're holding and to throw it and to release it into the fire itself. So the very will that you've used to get yourself there, you've got to be willing to let that go in the end. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's that surrender that everyone, it's such a catchphrase in the world of consciousness, and yes, meditation, and let it be, let thy be, don't stop being a human doing and be a human being and let it go. Her could be Frozen is playing all the time. I have a 2-year-old or near 2-year-old, so she's listening to Frozen all the time. Let it go, and it's let it go, and to trust that, and to also just I'm smiling here because you're oh, no big deal. It just took after 10 years of me doing this, such a generator profile style right there, because you're a pure generator. And so in human design, pure generators, when they're onto something, you go and you go and you go and you go. And you're yeah, just 10 years of my life. Whereas someone like myself, I'm 10 years of your life of doing this, you would be amongst the masters. You're a part of a master of your craft with that, going after these various essences and topics for this long of a period of time. And for you, I'm sure you're you still don't know enough. There's still so much more to experience and dive deeper with, right?
That's why I consider myself a perpetual student of life. And I love to keep myself there. I love to be a student more than anything else. I love the process of learning and expanding. And I'm sure that in the past, when I really look back on, I guess I've been practicing yoga now for 22 years or something. I feel the first maybe the first year I felt like a total beginner. And then the second year, I felt like I was kind of getting better. And then by the end of the second year, my teacher asked me to teach if I wanted to teach and stuff. And that was about the point where I thought I knew the most, which is such a joke because that's like 20 years ago. And 20 years later, I guess, sort of chucked the measurements. I don't bother wondering or thinking about if I'm better than or less than, or if I'm more evolved or less evolved, or if I'm closer to something or not. I just don't go there because I understand that such measurements, that such judgments and dichotomies only come with the mind. And I love and appreciate, like you said, living in your heart, which is a timeless space. And if you can just accept the fact that you don't need your measuring cups there, then you would just be so much more happy. And I think that's my message. Like, you can be happy.
My gosh, but there's so much more to share with that too. Right? When did you go to India? I'm just like, at what point did you go to India? And like when you're saying with your teacher, like, because brought yoga more prominent in Japan because it wasn't as prominent at that time, right? So you were on the fringe, right? You're on the fringe with doing this yoga thing and bringing it into Japan, and so talk to me about that. Like, there had to be so much trust and so much faith and so much knowingness, maybe a lot of, like, some scaredness, and like worry and fear, but not enough to stop you from going to India and then now bringing us back. And next thing you know, you're on the cover of the Yogini magazine and Japan on like however, like 42 covers. And so let's start talking about that. Like, what made you decide to go to India and then start carrying forward the work you do today?
So when I first started yoga really wasn't a thing in Japan yet. So there were only 3 yoga studios in all of Tokyo metropolitan area, which is like a joke. But I started going to a place that was relatively close to where I lived so that I could continue to practice. Because remember, I was like in the dumps when I started. Okay, I was in bad shape, not just physically, but emotionally and like mentally, I was in bad shape. So I knew that if I wanted to be healthy, I would have to somewhat continue something. So I started going there, but my teacher, once a year, would take a month-long hiatus to go to India for his own practice and study. So as I developed this daily morning practice, I practically lived in the studio. I was there 5 days a week, if not 6 days a week, okay? So if my teacher wasn't there for a whole month, I would notice. I would not only notice, I felt slightly abandoned, okay? It got me wondering where my teacher was going. And then, my human design, somewhat of a geek. So I geeked out on who my teacher's teacher is. What's this lineage? What's this tradition? And then I developed this idea of, I felt kind of like drinking at the source of the fountain. If he's going upstream and drinking up there, I want to go upstream. I'm not just going to like wait downstream for the stuff to trickle down. So I was definitely nervous at first. But fortunately, I speak and understand English. And then eventually I got really good at speaking and understanding Indian English, which is like a thing of itself, right? Just because their accents are so heavy, you have to kind of interpret them. But anyway, so in 2003, my Indian teacher was doing a world tour, and so I caught him for like a week or 2 during the world tour, and then the following year in 2004, I started going to South India.
Wow. You said, 2004, you went to where, you said?
South India.
South India. Okay. So you in different areas of India then. So you weren't just in one place. You traveled around a little bit then.
Well, initially, I was only going to this founding school of Ashtanga Yoga in South India. That's where I started in 2004. And that's where I actually kept going. I went every year for some 13 years, and I actually kept a house there. I would stay there for like about a total of maybe 3 or 4 months per year, every year for the first 13 years, which also means that I spent both of my pregnancies there. And with my firstborn son, even after I had the baby, he's, by the time he was 6 years old or 5 years old, he had been going to India every summer, so he grew up like his baby food was Indian food because he grew up on that stuff.
Oh my gosh, that is
Yeah.
another element that I'm just like, how did you do that? I have a 3 in my profile in human design, and so does my husband. He is actually a 1-3, similar to how your profile is. And we have this mass interest in wanting to be able to like go to another culture and spend at least a month there and then some, and to really immerse ourselves in the culture and, with purpose and everything. But you did that with a baby, and it's just you at the time, right? Just you and the baby, and then eventually 2 babies. And I mean, so you obviously had a whole nother family there too, to be spending that amount of time. And you said you had a home there. I can't even imagine, like, how did that come together? And was that just part of the magic of the manifestation of the house came in? Did you hunt for it? Like, how did that happen?
At that point, I wouldn't even say that there was no idea of like manifesting it or even intending for some of these chapters to unfold in my life. Again, I just go back to how I had started from such a desperate place of needing to get better. Because like I was in the shits, remember? So I needed this. I needed this to get better. I needed this to feel better. And when I started to feel a little better, it sparked something in me. I started to wonder, well, how healthy can I be? Like how balanced I can be? How pure can I polish this nervous system? So I actually kind of like went off on a whole other spectrum to somewhat of like a monkhood almost. I mean, I was eating like pure raw, like 90% raw organic in my 20s. And this is before my first pregnancy. And I was just, like I said, I would wake up at 2:50 in the morning to have like a silent bath or shower, silent mantra chanting, and then anywhere between 90 minutes to 2 hours and 20 minutes of asana practice, followed by maybe 10 minutes of pranayama, followed by 40 minutes of meditation, followed by like puja and like mantra chanting, which is like a Hindu form of worship. But for me, it was, again, a preparation to meditation. So I immersed my life. I immersed myself in this practice. I didn't, like every morning I would wake up and not talk to anybody for like the first 5 hours of my life because I spent it in silence. I spent it in beingness. And so that was a whole phase of my life. But also in my mid to late 20s, I had my first marriage. And my first husband was also a yoga practitioner. So we were very much in that lifestyle together. And actually, he was another person, aside from my first teacher, who really encouraged me to teach yoga because I actually wasn't interested in teaching. I was interested in learning. I was always interested in learning. But he just saw in me that one day I would make a great teacher. And he really pushed me, actually, to start teaching. And then I did. I started teaching. I started teaching when I felt like I was so blessed to get to go to India and to learn and study at the feet of the guru and to have these experiences that were transforming me. And at a certain point, I felt like I would be totally energetically constipated if I didn't start sharing what I was learning. So that's how I started sharing. I started traveling around different parts of Japan and sharing Ashtanga yoga and everything that was changing my life about food and diet and awareness. And then,
And were you still raw at this time?
what?
Plant-based. So, I mean, Anybody in the world of consciousness truly knows if they just shut out their ego and all the brainwashing of like eating animals and blah, 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 this other stuff. You truly know to clean and purify your vessel, you have to eat life. Life give life. Life-giving food, meaning not dead food. High frequency foods, meaning plants, right?
Right. So I had experimented with different like eating modalities throughout my 20s. And then first couple of times that I tried raw foods, I failed miserably because the winters in Japan, it was too cold. And then I wasn't getting quality plant foods. But when I sorted out what I wasn't getting right about getting the right quality of food and like the soil quality and the freshness and pure water, all of these elements, when I figured it all out, it started working for me. I mean, my body used to metabolize so fast that I would get a scar on my hand and it would heal itself without scabbing. I just needed like a few hours and my skin would regenerate and it would kind of fall off and shed like snake skin. My friends at the time used to call me, my bestie at the time said, May, you're like too healthy, it's sick. That was what she said to me. And then they used to call me, they used to call me Claire from that, what's that old TV series? There's like this cheerleader girl who regenerates herself. I can't even remember what the series was called.
Oh my gosh, no, I can't think of it, but it's like there's little pieces starting to come in right here. Yeah, I don't know, but somebody will know. It's one of the listeners are.
Yeah. So they but I also realized in my late 20s that I was also living in a bubble, right? Because you can't live and function in modern society, waking up at 2:50 a.m. and living like a monk. You gotta kind of segregate yourself
Before talking to anybody.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
my husband is
So
as soon as I wake up, I'm talking right away. So I'm like, oh, you did it. Is mass amount of discipline. Mass amount of discipline.
Yeah, and I would do that in India too. I don't think I could do that as much here in Japan. I mean, I could do it somewhat, but not as much as the way that I would dive deep into it in India. But yeah, I also recognized that I was kind of in this bubble. And so my first pregnancy helped me to rebalance that segregation between me and society. As soon as I was pregnant with the first one, I had been eating raw organic for like 2 years. But as soon as I got pregnant, I really wanted to eat potatoes and rice. Now, potatoes and rice are two things you don't eat without cooking. So I just followed my natural body's intuition, and I started eating potatoes and rice again, and I would cook them. So throughout my pregnancy, I never needed meat. I didn't even need seafood. And, but as I was still plant-based, but I started eating cooked foods again. And then the first child I had at a birthing center, which was a great experience. I was able to have a natural, unmedicated birth, but oh my God, Dr. Natalie, let me tell you, it was so painful. Okay, so my first birth,
bowling ball.
But here's the thing. You know the thing you were saying earlier about how people have this mindset of doing. They don't know how to come into relaxation, how to come into parasympathetic, how to let go. So that was me, like on steroids in my 20s. Okay. I was so do, like get shit done, high achiever, run, a lone wolf, let me do my thing. Okay. And I
personality. Yeah. I'm so good at it.
I've actually changed quite a bit, but in my 20s, that's how I was. So when I approached birth, I studied about it, I read about it, and I even read somewhat about pain-free and orgasmic births and stuff. But when I came across that information, it just didn't quite ring a bell for me because my mom, when I was a teenager, and my mom had 4 kids, I'm the last of 4 kids in my family, and my mom after I got my period in my teens, said to me, May, congratulations. Now your body is able, and, one day you're going to have your own babies too. But when the day comes and you get your contractions and it hurts very much, and it hurts so much, and it hurts so much that you want to go to the hospital, wait for it to hurt 100 times more before you go to the hospital. That was what my mom said to me. And y'all, I wasn't aware of it then, but clearly it had left a subconscious impression on my mind, because I couldn't shake off the idea, the thought that that giving birth would be super painful. So that was kind of how I walked in, even though I had developed so much awareness and I was so in tune with my body through 7 years of daily yoga practice by then, and eating raw. And, I was clean and super, super fit mentally and also physically. My core was super strong. As I prepared for birthing at the birthing center, I hadn't yet learned, and nobody had taught me, not even my midwife had quite guided me to this place of total surrender. So I walked into this birth and I just had this really, really painful experience. I felt like I was ripped off from my core, and I felt like, I just felt so torn apart. I felt like, why? How can God do this to women? This isn't how it's supposed to be. So it took me, weeks and months to recover, but eventually, of course, my body could recover and get back to a full-on, super athletic, rigorous yoga practice. And I never knew that I would have another child, especially because I was divorced from my first husband shortly after my son was born. So I was a single parent for a while. But I had this thought in the back of my mind that birthing, I just didn't think it was supposed to be that painful. And I thought, if I ever do this again, I think I can do this better the next time. So, years later, in my 30s, I remarried. And then we decided that we wanted another baby, and I was blessed with another pregnancy. So the second time around, I prepared myself in a whole different way. I prepared myself for surrender so that I don't need to be barged open. So the second birth is my whole story.
Oh, so what was part of that preparation? Because exactly what you're saying, most people are like, I'm physically ready. Well, I say most people that are prepared and they're physically ready, and they're okay, I know this idea of an orgasmic birth, or, the whole check the boxes, but there's a different level of mental preparation that made the shift for you to be able to surrender and to it's still painful, but to go through that birth portal and have a totally different look on it. So what did that look like for you? Let's say, how did you prepare?
Yeah, that's so awesome. And actually, from my second birth, I had an almost all pain-free birth. It wasn't orgasmic, but it was almost all pain-free. So I could tell you a little bit about that. And early in my second pregnancy, right? And by this time, my first son is 8 years old. I'm super happily remarried, and my husband is very in tune, not just with me, but also with the baby and with our growing family. And so we had this basis, this foundation of understanding, which I want to bring up because I feel like birthing is so whole that you don't want to be in this isolated, I'm the one that's doing this mindset. It's coming through you, but you're doing it together. You're doing it together with the force of life. You're doing it together with the baby, perhaps with your partner. Hopefully you have that relationship of trust with your partner, because that would that would support you hugely in your mindset and in your nervous system to know that you have that backup, right? If you have siblings or whatever, your relationship with your midwife, your doula, your doctor, just so that you have this basis of trust, because it's so imperative that the woman who is birthing can feel safe. Because if you don't feel safe, you can't relax. And you can't. So early in my pregnancy, the second time around, I was actually about to go for a clinic birth, but my husband was the one who noticed that. He was like, I don't think, is this stressing you out? Like something about how the nurses were scrutinizing my scores. I was super healthy. There was nothing wrong with me, but if, I was like 2 pounds over the bell curve, they had something to say about it. And I just wasn't really vibing with it. And so my husband was the one who was quick to point out, hey, is this stressing you out? Because if it is, we should change the birthing place. And at the time, I was 27 weeks in. And in Japan, with the birthing regulations, 28 weeks is the cutoff line for you to change birthing places if you have a change of mind, or if you're like going home, to whatever region you're from or whatever. But thanks to my husband's keen observation, I said, you're right. I might add also that the reason why I was just going to go for the clinic birth anyway was because I knew that my husband had paid the down payment for the clinic and that they don't reimburse.
Gosh, and look at that. Like, you're like, I just got to push through because we made this down payment. Oh,
that's what I thought. And that's what I said to my husband. But my husband, bless his soul, was like, hey, I know how much money I've paid and I know how much we're going to lose because they're not going to pay us back. But he also said, if any of this is stressing you out, I don't want this to stress you out. I don't want this to stress the baby out. We should change it. So I said to him, I've done all my research and I thought this was the best place. And if it's not, honey, we're going to end up doing this at home. And he said, that's okay, baby. Let's do this at home. So I know, right? It's so amazing. So I found a midwife that would be willing to come to our house. I started working with her and I totally switched gears. And I just knew that I not only needed to ignore what my mom said about how painful it would be this time, but that I would also need to repaint the landscape of my psyche. It wasn't going to be enough just to eliminate the negative. I needed new positive images, ideas that would help prepare me for the opening so I'm not just going in blind. So I started reading, studying, watching documentaries about the like home births and ecstatic birth and stuff. But I also had this weird little sense of watching other women give birth. I felt a little bit like it was risky for me because when you're watching these documentaries or whatever footage on YouTube or something, you don't really know how it's going to end until you get to the end. So I didn't want to expose myself to the risk of that. Right? Unless someone's like recommending you something, you don't really know. And mind you, I was like well into my second trimester by then. So then I got this brilliant idea of why don't I just watch wild animals? So every night on YouTube, I would watch beautiful wild animals giving birth. One night it was the gazelle. Another night it was the horse, giraffe, cat, cow, dog, buffalo, zebra, you name it, I'd seen it. And so and they're amazing. They just like, they all go into this zone of safety and relaxation. And like you should have seen the giraffe. It was like so tall and it still just plopped the baby out, like it was effortless. But I watched so many of these animals until finally one night it dawned upon me. If they can do it, so can I, right? only human, thank you, like only human beings scream in resistance, and we don't need to.
That right there, scream and resistance. I'm gonna like take that like literally because we've been hardwired and programmed and lovingly so, moms and whomever else passed on and friends and darn media, like not lovingly, is like, this is what it takes. You need to be in stirrups and your feet need to be up here and you need to have like poke and prodded and, IV sit in here and like, oh, it's a process. Oh, baby's not ready to come right now. Let's go ahead and give you some Pitocin, and the effect starts happening and you're not in your body. Like, we are mammals. You watched mammal birth babies, how they do it unhindered, untouched, and how they were able to do it because they have this divine wisdom inside of them, knowing exactly what to do, and they are able to be embodying that experience. Like they weren't taking coaching from anybody on how to
Yes.
baby giraffe, or you know what I mean? So, go.
Yes. And then these animals, right? They can't talk. They don't have words. God only knows what kind of thoughts they have, or even if they have thoughts or not. But what I can tell you from having observed a whole herd of these beings in their
Oh, pun intended, a herd.
There was a common thread. Okay, there were a few things that I felt like they were all doing. Okay, I can tell you a few of these. One, utmost fundamental, they ensure that they are in a safe environment. And by that, I don't just mean like security safe. I mean that the mama can feel safe. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you're in an expansive place or if you're in a small unit or if you're in a bright or dark place or whatever, as long as the mom feels safe in that environment. Okay, so that's the first ultimate thing that I sensed from watching these videos. The second is that in that safety, they move freely. None of them were like rigid or fixed in their body and behavior. There is a relaxation and a flow to the way that they would move their bodies and even their breath, because you can hear them. It's almost like they're moaning, almost not unlike the way a woman might open herself to her lover in bed. There is this freeness and openness, and then lastly, the voice part. Like, again, not unlike the moments you spend in bed making the baby, when it comes time to birth the baby, there was this openness, this moaning. There was no, it's always this this openness. And you can tell that their jaw and their neck and their body is not tensed up. There is this sense of release happening. So I used those footages to kind of repaint the landscape of my mind. And then of course, like by this time I had been teaching yoga and meditation, and leading guided shavasana are like my forte. And I had been doing this for like, I don't know, 16 years at that point. And then I was like, oh my God, why didn't I ever think about doing this to myself? So headset on, like an athlete training for the Olympics, because when your time comes, you only get one go at it. Just zone into that feeling, practice when the contractions come. Every time the wave comes, the more I allow, the more I release. The stronger the wave, the more intense the pressure, the bigger I am, the more I open. So that's how I practice. And that's exactly how it was for me in the moments of birth.
That is just like, I get like chill bumps thinking about it, because yes, we're talking all about birth right now. And for the listeners are like, I'm past that stage of life. I mean, you're way past that stage of life right now. I mean, you could still birth right now if you wanted to, but this applies to life. I'm sure
Yes.
learning to life moving forward, of like Can you ride the wave and flow with the wave? Yes, let's just start to move into that as we get closer. I know we're already I knew we were going to go like this and have so much to talk about in this episode. So I know we're going to have to continue and do like a part 2 and then like shift this, but this is a great like coming up and leading up to as you're describing this with birth, because this applies to how you can surrender and ride the wave in life and rewire those subconscious patternings that were led to believe that it had to be another way. It had to be so contracted, so tight, so stiff, so aggressive, when it doesn't have to be that way.
Yes. So I had to retrain my relationship to pain. Okay. So this is, and I'm using again the metaphor of my birth, but I believe that this can apply to other forms of pain, whether physical or mental or even emotional. Okay. So when you feel pain, or in my case, like as the contractions, as the intensified pressures were just pushing against me, the human conditioned response is to cringe, is to tighten up, tense up, and resist. Now, the thing that's different about birth, because with a lot of pain, you're so afraid that this might be the end, or that you might die, or that something worse might happen. So hence, you're going to resist, right? But the thing that's so different about birth is that you know that life is coming through.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's actually what I want to, I actually want to place that on other pain too, because even when you have other pain, like in my case with my grief, because I lost my husband just 5 months after having that home birth. Okay. And the waves of grief and the pain of grief was super intense, but I knew better than to resist it. I had no idea how my life would be or what it would look like after that loss, but I knew that it wasn't the end. Not for me, not for my kids, and I would even argue not even for my husband, right? Because energy just changes form, okay? But so as the pain intensifies, instead of the human conditioned response, which is to cringe, to resist, to tense up, if you could just use your conscious awareness to allow. This is something beyond me. This is something beyond my knowing. I have no idea what the other side of this is going to look like, but I am humbled. It is not in my power to control this phase of my life, and I release, I surrender. And you used this word earlier, you said faith, but if you have that trust in your body, in your baby, in your life, and in your future, you know, it's so intangible that I don't know what else to call it, but to call it trust. But just a little bit, just enough to say, hey, there might be another way. You know, there might be a higher way than me just holding up this fort and resistance. And so in the case of my home birth, you know, the waves would come, I would allow. They would come stronger, they would come bigger. I would allow bigger. I would allow bigger. I would allow bigger, release bigger. And then in the final 40 minutes or so, I wanted to be in the tub, in the warm tub. So my husband had prepared this warm tub for me. We moved into the bathroom, and I was accompanied by my midwife and my husband. And this was 6 a.m.-ish on a Wednesday morning. And I, in the corner of my mind, I'm like, oh, my 8-year-old's going to wake up any minute now because he's going to think it's a regular school day, right? But I'm in the bathtub and just moving like one of those wild animals, just going and using words like open and release to guide my mind that way. Because if I use those words, the body would follow. If my mind can go there, the body would follow. Sure enough, the little one wakes up. He runs into the dining room, the living room. Nobody's there. Oddly quiet in the kitchen. Finally, he finds his way into the bathroom. We're like having a freaking birthday party there. And he's like, Mom,
It is a birthday
what do you
party.
think? Yes, we are. That's what I mean. So he goes, Mom, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm kind of in the middle of something. Well, honey, would you mind waiting in the living room? I said, I'm fine. I'm doing just fine, but I just need you to wait in the living room. just in case something went wrong, I didn't want the risk of him witnessing something that, we wouldn't be able to avoid. So I asked him to wait in the living room. And he goes, okay. And I hear him trotting down the hall. And at some point he stops and he hollers. He goes, wait, but Mom, do I have to go to school today? And I holler back at him from the tub. This is just like minutes before giving birth. No, honey. And he goes, why? And I'd say, because your brother's going to be born today. And so I hear him trot down the hall. And just moments after that, with a pop and a gush, that my water broke in the tub. And I had told my midwife that it was a dream of mine to take up the baby with my own hand, if at all possible. That I wanted my hand to be the first that his head would touch in this world, And I, because the water allowed for movement on my body. And then as he started to crown, my midwife said, Mae-san, you should reach with your hand. You can feel his head. And so I reach with my left hand and I touch this gentle virgin fluffy hair just slaying underwater. And it gave me so much power, like, oh, the end was near. And I just needed like one more push to get his shoulder and his body out. But the thing I want to tell you is that, you know how I said that my birth was almost all pain-free? Here's how I know. Because right in that final moment, before his head was about to crown, like as his head is descending into the birth canal, I was aware that I had the thought, ouch, enter my mind for the first time. I was so hyper aware that I caught the thought, ouch, enter my mind for the first time. And then that's when I thought, oh, heck, it's been 9 hours and I had the thought, ouch, this whole time. Because the whole time, with the heightening contractions, I had allowed bigger. I hadn't even thought, ouch, until like the final moment. So when the thought, ouch, entered, I was very aware that the thought, ouch, had nothing to do with the experience, the sensation. The sensation is not ouch. The sensation is purely pressure. The sensation is just pure experience, pure sensation. The thought is a label that follows the experience. And I was aware enough to know the difference. So when the thought, ouch, entered my mind, I almost like swiped left on it. I didn't take it so seriously, like, oh my God, this is so painful and this is going to be so bad. That wasn't my reaction. I was like, sure.
You're like, nope.
Yeah. I was like, oh, exactly. And that's the thing, is that you can choose which to engage with and which not to engage with. And in this case, I thought, I aware that the thought, ouch, came up in my psyche, and then I just let it flow by. And that was the only moment in the 9 hours and however many minutes that I thought, ouch. So nothing else was, that's why I say it was almost all pain-free.
And
yeah.
Such a and like, this is all so beautifully described. And I get like, oh, I just love hearing birth stories. But it's so beautifully described through birth. But that same present time awareness of like seeing the word and not feeling into the word. Like you were able to like disassociate what the typical meaning of the word is, and to not actually have to like allow it to be present in your body and not embody it. Like you had the opportunity to choose and the awareness of it to choose to I'm going to feel the ouch, or I'm not going to feel the ouch, or I'm going to allow myself to believe that that's an ouch of the way I'm programmed to believe what an ouch is. You decided, like, I love how you said, like, you swipe left. You were like essentially swiping left with it. Like, I choose not.
Yes.
And that's like part of the
Yes.
beauty of meditation, right? Is like, thank
Yes.
goodness, act on all of our thoughts in our head, because we would have all killed ourselves by now. Now, granted, we would be like
Yes.
reincarnate, but go on. So let's go.
Well, and that's the thing, though, because I think when I talk about the clear recognition of a thought and having the reins in my hands in a way that I could choose if I want to swipe left or not, to have that distance between myself and my thoughts, myself and my mental activities. I think a lot of people would be like, well, wait, I'm always so involved with my thoughts. I am my thoughts. Like, how do I even get there? But that's what I mean. I think that's what you mean. And, when these teachers teach us to live in our hearts, to be in our hearts, to get out of your mind, to get out of your head and observe your thoughts. When you're observing your thoughts, you're not in your mind, you're not in your head. And metaphorically speaking, that's what they mean when you're in heart consciousness.
Yes. Yes. Gosh, like that, and gosh, we could go on for so many more hours with this, but I want to try to like wrap this up with this part here, at least, on what would you say is the easiest, all the years of your training, but what can you encourage people who don't have those years of training, the knowledge that you have? What can they start doing today to start disassociating from those thoughts that come into the head all the time and start choosing no or swiping left? What would you say would be an actionable, tangible thing people can start doing now, and then expanding upon it, obviously, because this is the practice. Again, it's the practice and journey of life, right? Not something you're going to accomplish one time and you've got a certificate and you never have to work on it again. But what would be the best way for somebody to get started with doing, using that, like, that associative law of attraction of like, oh, witnessing it happen and then doing it again and and creating that ripple effect in all areas of their life?
I want to encourage people.
Question answer.
Well, but I actually also teach a lot of this every week because I'm still teaching like meditation and mindfulness and stuff. And unfortunately, my classes are all in Japanese now. So eventually I should do this in English too. But I like to encourage my friends and those in the community to create space. It requires slowing down, and intentional slowing down. And like you said, shifting from the doing, like the to-do list mindset to being. Now, to get a head start on this, I highly recommend that you just take the beginning moments of your day. So when you wake up in the morning, whether you use an alarm clock or you wake up naturally or whatever, just say to yourself, okay, for the first 20 minutes of your day, I'm not going to jump to my phone. I'm not going to open my emails. I'm not going to play the music. I'm not going to engage in my thoughts. I'm not going to pick up the things that I was worried about last night. I'm just going to be the gentle observer. I'm just going to watch. Just observe. And that's the hardest part about practicing meditation, is that it's like a non-doing. No one can teach you to not do anything, right? It's like all you can do is just be. So it's almost like a negation of everything that school ever taught you to do, or everything that society ever taught you to do. Because school, society, your parents, everyone teaches you to like get shit done, really. It's like, don't just hang out and do nothing. Fill in your schedule, fill in your time, and like accomplish something. But meditation is like the opposite. It's just to allow yourself to be as you are and observe that. Observe the space.
Yeah. It's so incredibly hard. Even knowing what I know, but want to go right into checking my inbox, clearing through my inbox, like relieving this pressure that self-induced that I'm putting on myself. And I'm like, I just got to relieve that pressure. But then guess what? It builds right back up again because my body's addicted to it. And then I just have to relieve it over here. And then instead of just taking the pause, the conscious pause, or even just 5 minutes, right? Then yes, 20 minutes or however long you could do to expand upon that. So
Yeah.
gosh, and it's a powerful thing. And I would say it's almost like a doing question. In the act of being and in the pausing, would you recommend somebody to build up, like say, start with just 5 minutes? So that way they don't feel the pressure of like, and then continue, like maybe giving themselves a little more time. And then like, here's another thing. Is there a particular type of breath work that you would say do this in association with a breathing of inhaling for 4 and exhaling for 4, like maybe pairing that at the same time? So because the act of the breathing and the focusing on the breathing can remove your mind from all those thoughts that are coming in, right? Because then now you're just focusing on the breath. So would that be a good thing to do at that same time?
Yeah, the great thing about using your breath is that you never lose it. You always have it with you anywhere you go at whatever hour, no matter how messed up you are, right? So it's a great tangible tool that you can get a hold of when you feel out of balance. You can use it immediately and it'll help you immediately. It's kind of like if you were learning to walk and you needed to hold onto a handrail, to help you along your way. You can just count your breath and you can go inhale and exhale. Choose a number that's comfortable for you. Like 4 or 5 or 6 is usually a good amount of length for most people. If it feels long for you, make it shorter. If it feels short for you, make it a little longer. And it will probably depend on your day if you're that observant. But this equanimous breathing is something that can assist you throughout life. And, the thing is, consciousness is everywhere, at all times, omnipresent, and therefore, it doesn't matter. It doesn't care. It doesn't choose from which door or window you enter its grace. If you want to go in through the window of breath work, great. If you want to start with yoga, great. If you want to start with meditation, if you want to start with a silent practice, if you want to start, taking pottery classes and it helps you focus, anything that gives you that spaciousness of mind. So consciousness doesn't mind. You enter through the love of your heart. If making pottery is your thing, enter through there. If riding horses is your thing, enter through there. If hugging your kids is your thing, hug them. Just it's what calls your heart. Walk in nature, but like you said, that when our mind pushes us to do, to like get shit done, it's like you're not allowing yourself to be because you require more doing, and it's really this allowance of allowing more space, allowing more time, allowing more grace. So whatever calls your heart.
Gosh, this has been so beautiful. I just want to keep going on. So I'm assuming, are you open to continuing this on? Because I know our listeners are going to be like, oh, we might be lingering a little bit right here. I want to hear more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, can they hear more of you here? It sounds like a yes. But where can they hear more of you?
Yeah, I would love it if you... Yeah, I would love it if you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is MaeYoshikawa. Yoshikawa, where I try to post bilingually for the most part. And then we spoke a lot about yoga and meditation today. My other love is writing. So I've recently signed with a New York literary agency towards the publication of my first book in English, which is a memoir, which dives into a lot of the stuff that we spoke about today. The working title is Kizuki, which is the Japanese word for realization or epiphany, something that you were formerly unaware of that you realized. And once you realize something, you can't unrealize it. So it works through my experience. Yes, it works through my experience of grief and also pregnancy and child rearing, and how everything I need to know about coping with pain in life, I learned through birthing my children, right? But it's really a story of the metamorphosis of my identity as I've gone through these life experiences. So I would say it's going to be like another year or so before the book is out in stores. So please find me on Instagram. And also my flagship website is maey.live. So you can learn more about my book there as well.
Oh, perfect. So I was just going to ask you to spell out your book again, because I want to lock in that word. So what is the word again?
It's called Kizuki, Kizuki. And you can find that on my website too. I have a page that's dedicated to my book, so you can learn more about it there.
Oh, it's so exciting. Without a doubt, people, I know I'm going to be following it. I'm going to want to know when the book comes out. My last podcast I did was with another one that was putting her book out, and it's a memoir in relation to child rearing and everything else too. And this is just beautiful work that you women are putting out here, doing wonderful things, having gone through, yes, life and experiences, but coming out on the other side and wanting to share that with others. So thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you so much for, being vulnerable, putting yourself out there, and then continuing to spread that message to empower and inspire other people to find that space.
Dr. Natalie, it's been such a joy. I'm so grateful to have connected with you. I'm so grateful for your audience, and I can't wait till we get to talk again.
Me either. Oh my gosh. You have a blessed rest of your day. And yes, until next time. And just find in the show notes too, you know where to find her, where we could follow up with her, and definitely keep hurrahing her as she bring out this that I know is going to be so exciting to talk about and be exciting to read when it comes out. So you have a wonderful day, and until next time.
Thank you so much.